Hello and welcome to the final event of the British Cheese Weekender. We hope you've had a wonderful 3 days watching cheesemongers, cheesemakers, chefs, food writers talking and eating cheese, and most importantly of all, we hope you've bought some lovely British cheese and tasted along with all the events. Final one of the weekend, like we did last year, we've got a bit of a panel debate. Last year we were talking about what the crisis meant. Well, we're through that, and now we're looking sort of forward of what does the future hold for British cheese. I'm Patrick McGuigan. I'm a cheese writer and journalist, and I do training for the Academy of Cheese and work closely with the Guild of Fine Food. I have one of the organisers of the British Cheese Weekender, I should say, with Tracey Colley, who's with us. And I was getting excited. I got distracted there by my cheese. So we've all brought a cheese. We'll introduce ourselves in a sec. Mine is a new Wensleydale, which sounds a bit confusing, but it's a new producer of a very traditional cheese, Wensleydale. They're called the Home Farmer. They're based in Yorkshire, and this is a really traditional cloth-bound raw milk Wensleydale, so made in the sort of traditional style. I'm just going to put that right up to the camera. Look at that gorgeous golden
Beautiful.
cheese. No, look
nice.
So that's me and my cheese. Who should we? Tracey, over to you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you've had a fantastic weekend. I'm Tracey Colley, Academy of Cheese Director and founder of the British Cheese Weekender with Patrick. I have recently moved to Norfolk to be nearer to my children and granddaughter. So I've gone local and I've got smoked apple, beautiful cheese. I've gone smoked. I know a lot of people don't like smoked cheese, but this is a traditional cloth-bound cheese on raw milk, made by Ferndale and Norfolk cheeses. And I'm going to go and visit them when I'm allowed, because it tastes amazing. I'm using it to cook with. I really love it to cook with as well. So superb. Love it.
Very nice. And
Nice.
Catherine, over to you.
I'm Catherine Mead, and I am the chairman of the Specialist Cheesemakers Association, who are so pleased and appreciative of the rerun of the British Cheese Weekender, the Great British Cheese Weekender. And as Tracey said, it's been a great weekend and just wonderful to see so many different cheeses tasted, so many different cheese experiences discussed, and the great conversation around cheese, which is really fab. Long may it continue. I'm also owner of Cornish-based Liner Dairies, and we make Cornish yard, nettle covered cheese, not a dissimilar texture, Patrick, to the Wensleydale that you produce. A little bit more closed, more, probably a bit more lactic, a little bit less acid, and we coat it by hand with stinging nettles, which then naturally rind. And see if I can be as
that's good.
adept as you. Go up to the, so they naturally mold up, and you get this white bloomy mold. And as the nettles mature, so the cheese under the rind gets a bit softer and remains a bit crumbly in the core. So very lactic, very fresh. The milkiness is really coming through in this cheese, and I've been really very tempted by this one. Eating a tad more than I need.
It looks like you've been having a few nibbles at that.
I might have done. Possible.
John, introduce yourself, and you were showing us your cheese a little bit earlier, and I was yeah, it looks incredible.
We can smell it.
Yes, I'm going to culturally challenge you all in a mode. Just quickly, well done, Pat and Tracey, and all involved in pulling this together this weekend. Great job. I think it's fair and right to say that. God defend me from that Welsh fairy, lest he transform me to a piece of cheese. Tell me what's that's from, team?
It's got to be Shakespeare.
Well done.
Yeah, it feels
Is
like
it Midsummer Night's Dream?
dream.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, it's The Merry Wives of Windsor. And I have here a piece of Shakespeare from the Book and Bucket Cheese Company. Cheesemaker is Peter Morgan.
Oh.
I always try to
Wow.
avoid European comparison, but it is a brie-like cheese. To brie or not to brie, I think. But actually, this weekend, you will know because you're all learned folk, is allegedly not only William Shakespeare's birthday, but also when he croaked. So he apparently was born and died on the same day. I have to confess, I didn't realize that until quite recently. So that is why I've got Shakespeare. It's from Cranbourne, made on the Cranbourne estate, which is only about 20 minutes from our office here in Gillingham. And that is why I am consuming that today. John Farrand, Guild of Fine Food. We organize Great Taste. We organize the World Cheese Awards. We do some training in cheese. We publish mags, and it's great to be here.
Brilliant. And John, you represent a lot of independent retailers as well, which we'll come on to in terms of delis and farm shops and food halls and cheesemongers. This time last year, when we launched the British Cheese Weekend, the cheese industry was in crisis. Restaurants had closed. Small cheesemakers were left with lots of cheese in their maturing rooms, and were kind of worried where it was all going to go. We're sort of through that, and I think it's been talked about a lot over this weekend in a lot of the talks. But just quickly to recap, Catherine, in terms of how the industry has adapted in the past year since the first lockdown, what kind of things have cheesemakers, and we're talking the smaller cheesemakers, the specialist cheesemakers, what have they been doing to get through this period?
I think this period has been probably the greatest period of engagement with our customers, with our consumers that we've ever seen, because there has been this real consolidation in the home and interest in food. People are reading about food, they're buying food online, they're tasting food from independents and delis, and cheese really comes to the top in this. And I think a lot of our SCA members and cheesemakers are saying, you know, we've had so much interest. It's fantastic how much interest we've had. I think big issues coming out are about sustainability, about short supply chains, environmental impact, understanding how the cheese is made on farm, and consumer interest in where does my food come from. That ties in hugely with some of the debates about the new agricultural bill, which has been a big deal for those of us who are farming, and we're really thinking about it. So there's been this really interesting conflation of different issues that has really put cheese, variety and British cheeses into people's homes in a very positive way.
But the cheesemakers have helped themselves in that regard by being, over the past year, it seems to be being more proactive, setting up online shops, cheesemakers doing Zoom tastings. They've played their part to make that happen, haven't they?
I think there's an irony in a way that we've all been socially distanced and you know, isolated, and we're working in our little bubbles and we're keeping away from people, and yet we've probably been more present than we've ever been before. You know, and we're present on the digital platforms, but we're also so present in stores, through the post. We're much more accessible than we were. You know, there was a time when people might ring a cheesemaker and say, I tried some of your cheese while I was passing, or I was in a restaurant, I loved it so much, where can I get it from? And then there's this massive pregnant pause while the cheesemaker thinks, oh, they're based in, you know, a small village in Gloucestershire, and actually the nearest place they might be able to get it is 20 miles away, and are they going to go and look for that? And now the majority of cheesemakers can say either buy it directly from me online or buy it from one of my really good, knowledgeable customers who will sell it to you directly online. So it's made it so much simpler for customers to buy cheese. And, you know, coupled with which, I know a lot of cheesemakers we have here have set up a very small shop, and it's not that we're seeing, you know, hundreds and thousands of customers, and nor are we wishing to, but it means that those people in our community can really engage in the way, Patrick, you, brother John, has talked about with Cranbourne, and Tracey with Ferndale. We're trying to act, we're coming much closer to our customers than the way where we were before. And I think that this is all to the good. This is just such a good basis to build.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I've been reporting on the British cheese industry for 15 years, and what's happened in the past year is it's sort of fast forwarded everything for,
yeah,
you know, they were slowly getting into online sales and perhaps but it's all sped up massively in the past year. I think, Tracey, with the Academy of Cheese, it's had a similar, the Academy of Cheese is an accreditation for, you know, providing knowledge, teaching people about cheese, but actually there's been some real benefits, isn't there, in terms of opening up access to cheese knowledge online and in the past year.
Most definitely. I mean, we've seen well, when we sat here last year, we had no classroom courses at all. So everybody, where we'd gone to a venue to take the Academy of Cheese training, that had disappeared, obviously. We still had our e-learning and our self-study course online. And beyond the British Cheese Weekend, we started training virtually. And Patrick, you yourself came on as the online cheese school, and have seen the demand for people wanting to learn, wanting to improve their knowledge, wanting to improve how they taste these amazing products, cheeses. And they've had more time because some of them have been furloughed. So we've seen a vast increase on people joining us for virtual classroom courses with our amazing training partners. And that's gone up leaps and bounds, which has been fantastic. So, and that in itself, because we taste cheeses as part of the course, you've been shipping out cheeses for your courses, Patrick, to the individuals' homes. So they've suddenly realised, and it's arrived, and it's been sent maybe from Paxton and Whitfield, it's maybe been sent from the Cheese Geek, it's maybe been sent from whoever who the training partner engages with to do that. But when it arrives, they say, whoa, that I can get these amazing cheeses now delivered to my door. So yeah, local has become your doorstep, basically.
It does feel, it's been, in some ways, it's been a really good year for a section of the British public who wouldn't have necessarily tried, you know, artisan cheese, or John, who wouldn't necessarily have gone to their local deli. But because everything sort of got thrown up in the air, and people were sort of, you know, certainly in the early days, were using their delis and farm shops and cheese shops as, you know, that's where they went to get, they couldn't get a supermarket delivery, so they started going to delis and farm shops, or they started ordering online. It feels like there's a sort of almost this fine food sector and good cheese sector has suddenly found, there's a whole swathe of the country that it's been talking to in the past year that wouldn't have known about it previously. John, I'm interested with the retailers, the delis, and because they've had quite a good year, a lot of them, haven't they? And farm shops. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I mean, broadly speaking, those in sort of rural village, sort of market towns have done really, not really well is an exaggeration, but they've done quite well. And lots of people have discovered them. So customers have gone out and found them for several reasons, often because safety, they don't want to hang out in crowded supermarkets. Or I actually really believe that one of the small pluses to the dreadful thing that we've all endured for the last 12 months is there's a wee sense of community starting to develop, not only amongst consumers and their retailers, but also amongst producers, which I think is a good thing. I mean, the trick now for our sector, and as you say, we represent you know, sort of 4,000 or 5,000 independent retailers. The trick for them is to hang on to those, some of them new customers or more regular customers, and to keep them coming back in to that shop.
Well, what do you think? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is actually there's this, I don't know, say it's 10% of the country has suddenly discovered good cheese and good shops during this period. We're sort of coming out of lockdown. Things are getting back to normal. Do you think, John, people are all going to start flooding back to the supermarkets and abandon their delis, or will some people do that? Or how do you see it playing out? Do you think this is a long-term change?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a long-term change. Not everyone who's discovered an independent shop in the last 12 months is going to carry on shopping there. We're fools if we think that's the case. But I certainly think a percentage of them will. I think a lot of that will be because a lot more people are going to work from home, whether we like it or not. That means they're going to shop in the local shops more because it's easier. They can pop out from home during the day rather than being stuck in London or any other metropolis where they don't support their local shops. I think there was a trend before this even started for people wanting to know who's made it, why it was made, where it was made, what's in it, and local educated retailers, especially with cheese, were giving that to their customers. I think there's going to be a significant proportion of the population who buy less but better after this for many reasons, not just to do with the quality of the food, but to do with the environment and other sort of fundamental decisions that people are starting to address, having thought about their lives over the last 12 months and how they're structured. So I'm positive about independent retail in the future.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I sort of wondered as well with the online sales, which I think has been an avenue for people. It sort of has become a thing to order a cheese box during the pandemic. It became almost like a sort of a real trend of buying really good cheese on the internet and getting. I
don't know if you know Nielsen, the research company, put out a post on LinkedIn, and they said there was 3 things that people had spent more money on during lockdown: oranges, speciality cheese, and kidney beans.
What?
Yes. But specialty cheese was in that top 3.
Oranges, I can get vitamin C, people worried about health. And kidney beans, was everyone making chili con carne like crazy during lockdown?
Probably.
Chili con what?
Chili con carne. It's a Yorkshire speciality, John. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, actually, talking about cooking, is that's been a big trend, hasn't it? And that sort of lifestyle change.
Go out. Yeah.
People have been at home more, they've not been doing the commute, they've actually got into cooking and really enjoyed it. And so cheese has benefited from that as well. I think there's been a lot of people, ordering nice cheeses to have with a nice meal at home that they've cooked or as a cooking ingredient. But Catherine, what's your feel on whether that sort of online, buying direct from cheesemakers or cheesemongers, do you think that's going to continue now?
I think it probably is, because we've got a little bit more sophisticated as the year's gone on. So as you rightly alluded to this time last year, where cheesemakers were pretty panicked about the amount of cheese they had in stores and whether or not they could find a market for it. And frankly, most people barely did. There was a lot of cheese going to charities and food banks and so on. But and then we got into a straight thing of go on social media, say, I've got the cheese, just get in contact and we'll send you the cheese. Now, I think an awful lot of us are saying, here are some interesting pairings. That's the same question people will ask, when they come to see us, or they maybe ask online and they say, what goes well with, in my instance, Cornish yarg? And I say, well, you might put fruit with it, you might put this kind of chutney with it, you might put this kind of cracker with it. Well, actually now the best thing that we can do is to say, here's your paired box. We're going to, help you and do that for you. And so
curated.
It is curated, and it becomes a very easy solution for, that lunch, that supper, that whatever else. But also I think it is all part of that education. And one of the things as cheesemakers, I think we hadn't really completely understood was actually how much complexity there is in our area, and how nervous people can be about standing in front of the counter and buying the wrong thing. So if we can help them through it and say, here's a box, it's got a couple of things that that are going to be familiar. You're going to be really happy. Believe us, trust our knowledge and our experience, and try this new cheese, like the one that John is showing us today, that looked pretty assertive in its endeavours to get off the plate, and say, you know, have a go. We think it's delicious. We wonder if you will. And I think if you're giving people a choice of 2 or 3 or even 4 products, they've got a moment when they can say, well, I really like those 2, but actually, you know what? I don't think the other one's for me. But it might be for somebody else in their family or, you know, friendship group, whatever, who else they're trying with. So I think we've been far, far more innovative, but we've also been much more aware of the need to explain and to have the conversation. And that's why events like Great British Cheese Weekender are so key to that education, and just being able to get into people's homes and give them the time to think about what they're eating. And with the best will in the world, you can't do that when you're just in a fleeting kind of cheese board in a restaurant. You can give a bit of detail, a bit of information, but you don't get this opportunity that we've had for a much longer conversation.
I was talking to a cheesemaker who does lots of farmers markets and has done for 20 years, and he was saying to me that normally you can he can tell you what each market will bring in. You know, they're very constant. You know, there's not a huge, sales don't suddenly shoot up or drop down. You know, over a year you can sort of pin your hat on what it's going to be. And he said in the past year sales are up 50% across all farmers markets, because people have not. I think people have realised that it's been hard initially to get into supermarkets. People have been a bit scared to go into supermarkets. And I've sort of discovered other avenues and then actually quite like them and keep going back to them. But that, for me, if you think of a farmer's market outdoors in terms of, you know, safe shopping, where, you know, everything outdoors is sort of better than being indoors. So, and that is the perfect space for a cheesemaker to directly communicate with their customer, learn more about them and what they want, which has always been the case, but it feels even more so. And one of the things, I mean, I did my talk over the weekender about lockdown cheeses. There's been sort of surge of new product development from artisan cheesemakers in the UK. You know, some of that was to do with storing milk. So if they made a soft cheese, you know, in the height of the different lockdowns, it made sense to put it into a hard cheese to store the milk and, you know, not be so time sensitive. But then on the other hand, we had hard cheese makers who were making soft cheeses because they wanted to round out their range and be able to offer their customer a full cheese board, you know, so as well as a hard cheese, they start making a soft and a blue. And then suddenly, you know, they can do a whole online order. Or when they approach retailers, actually, retailers have minimum orders, don't they? And so it can be hard to hit a minimum order with one cheese, but if you can offer a retailer 3 or 4, they're more likely to buy from you. But that is interesting. That's a sort of how quickly the cheesemakers have listened to the market, seen what their customers want, whether that's the public or retailers, or even it could be restaurants, I suppose, now they're reopening. But it feels a bit more dynamic, you know, that ability just to change and create really good products. That was the other thing. The new cheeses that I've tasted in the past year, you know, often people launch a cheese, it takes a few years for it to settle down, but they've been really good from
on the button, haven't they?
As soon as they hit the ground. That shows the skill, I think, in British cheese now, that actually cheesemakers are technically good enough to switch styles and make a really good cheese, pretty much, you know.
I think, Patrick, a sort of quick plug for the Specialist Cheesemakers Association. You know, 20 years ago, if you were setting up a cheese, it was and starting to develop a cheese, it was there were a limited number of places that you could go, or people that you could turn to support you in making a new cheese or being a new cheese business. And the SCA has really developed the materials, resources, and the technical support that they can give to the very new cheesemaker, as well as the cheesemaker who's been making cheese for a significant length of time, but now wants to do something that's a bit different and sits slightly outside their normal knowledge. And I think we've really seen how that's come to fruition in the last couple of years. It's been really, really positive.
No, that's good. John, I know you want to talk about Brexit. I know it's on the agenda. I sort of wondered, talking about the future of British cheese, I did wonder whether Brexit is an opportunity for British cheese, in that if there's fewer continentals coming in, actually, continental cheeses become more expensive. That gives an opportunity for artisan British cheesemakers, or not. What's your take on how that's going to affect things?
I think both. Just before I answer, just as a sort of full stop to that last point, there's a certain amount of irony to the fact that there's been this wonderful innovation by cheesemakers, and not just during lockdown, but before that as well. British cheese was in a great place in terms of new stuff. Also, people finding new cheeses through farmers markets, as you say, through online. And these are lots of new people finding out about well-made cheese. There's a lovely irony, in my humble opinion, in that the supermarkets during lockdown actually reduce their ranges of cheeses, certainly cutting out the smaller, more interesting makers, so that they could make things easier for themselves. And I love the irony of that now people who've discovered these great cheeses are going to have to go and find them in independent retailers because the supermarket sold out of it. Brexit, it is, to answer your question, I think both an opportunity. Of course, it's an opportunity because potentially less cheeses will come in from the continent. And that is a fact. I have to sit on various dull committees and try and sort of raise the flag for the smaller makers and retailers. And there is a lot of griping out there about food and drink moving both ways, actually, into this country as ingredients for people to make things, but also for us to export. And I think we all know the sort of difficulties in the paperwork and the bureaucracy has been really tricky. But for me, I think there's a wider point about Brexit, which I'd just like to make, is that I've seen food and drink develop over the last 25, 30 years. And I remember what the world thought about British food and drink. I remember what the French thought about British cheese 25 or 30 years ago. And my biggest concern now is that if we can't export, or it doesn't become, it's too much of a faff for people to export, and that's what it's becoming at the moment. They're sort of giving up because there's too much to it. I'm really worried that the view of the rest of Europe and the world about the UK as a great food and drink nation will start to diminish. And we've really worked hard from where we were 25 years ago when we were fish and chips and overdone roast beef, to being respected, not just in cheese, but in other things as well, where people come to us now, they visit us, the food tourism thing's massively important, and we are respected on the world stage for making good food and drink. And I'm worried that's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a few articles on this where the bigger guys who can fill a full lorry with cheese, it's a lot easier for them to export, because it's sort of one shipment, if you like. It's these mixed loads, which makes it much more complicated, because if one pallet on that lorry has the wrong paperwork, it holds up everything. It holds up the whole lorry and all those other orders. And so what that necessarily means is that the smaller guys, who would sort of share sort of group haulage and that sort of thing, it's putting them off and making it more difficult. I think we're waiting to see how that evolves. It's sort of, it's not early days anymore, but it's still, I think in the next few months it'll become clearer, can cheese makers get around this? But Tracey, I mean, with the Academy, you've got the Academy, that's one of the things that's happened in the past year, has gone quite global, hasn't it? The internet has allowed it to, students from all over the world to tune into classes. Do you get a sense of the reputation of British cheese? I mean, in some ways, the Academy is a good vehicle, sort of bangs the drum for British cheese, doesn't it, internationally?
Most definitely. And what we found is the people joining the virtual classes are from all over the world, even to the point where you've got people from Australia staying up at silly hours of the evening, in the middle of the night to take our classes. What we are getting asked a lot by our training partners, because we've got a number of training partners overseas now, and they do want to get hold of the cheese. So they are coming to me and they're asking me for distributors of the cheeses, that the British cheeses that we study at Academy of Cheese Level 1 and Level 2. So I have had quite a few conversations with the specialty cheese distributors who were exporting, Fine Cheese Company, Neal's Yard Dairy, you've got the bigger boys, Singletons and White Farms, as to who are they supplying, how are they getting it there, and it feels like they are sending bigger amounts now to make it more economical in terms of paperwork and veterinary certificates. But how, you know, is the question I'm waiting to see is whether that will create shortages, because lots of small consignments is a lot better almost than one big one, especially with cheese that's going to have a shelf life. I think the few of them have actually set up European hubs, haven't they, where it cancels out some of the paperwork because they're sending it to their own business. But I think you're right, we're going to have to wait a few more months to see what the real Brexit effect is, because they've either got to put their prices up or take a hit in margin.
The issue will be with continental cheeses coming into the UK. At the moment, they don't have to jump over these kind of hurdles. That was meant to, it was really annoying actually. I was writing an article on it, that the kind of certifications and health certificates and stuff were going to suddenly be applied to continental cheeses coming into the UK around now, and that would have, you know, had supply issues, probably put prices up. The government kicked that down the line and said let's come back to that in October. So they extended this period. So at the moment, British cheesemakers have to jump over lots of hurdles in terms of paperwork, but continental cheeses coming into the UK don't. But that is, at some point, that's going to kick in, and that will be interesting to see a bit further down the line. I think it's October and January, I think, where that's going to come in, is if continental cheeses then have more supply issues and are more expensive, then suddenly artisan cheesemakers have an opportunity again in their own country. It's all a bit, who knows? And we're not quite sure with the pandemic as well. You know, is this it? Are we finally out of it? Restaurants are going to open next month.
Maybe.
Hooray, we're all, or are there other? I mean, I sort of
Well,
wonder.
we do know that France is still in a very significant period of lockdown, and therefore we know that at the moment the supply arrangements and logistics are not as smooth running as we all hope they might be, and you know, our fears have been vindicated, I suppose. But what we don't really know is what the impact of the pandemic has been on the demand overseas. And until they're out and in their restaurants again, and in their out and you know, and food services up and running and flowing freely, I think it's going to be very difficult to judge what the effect or the impact on the sales, export sales are. Just as it would be here with the import sales.
I mean,
so quite a few. I mean, you know, we're not out of the woods completely, but there's. I mean, this has been interesting. We have to tie up the conversation now, but there's obviously a lot of opportunities, it feels to me, for British cheese that weren't there pre-pandemic. Actually, it's certainly in this country, the market has opened up. It's good cheese has suddenly become a bit more accessible to the wider public through great retailers, online retailers, and the cheesemakers themselves, which is a good. I mean, you know, if we had to say where we're at in it now, I mean, we're in a better place than we were a year ago. We can all say that, can't we?
For sure.
Yeah.
And
yeah, for
there's
sure.
some quite interesting. I think there's quite a lot of potential for positivity. I think changes to, like John was saying earlier, people working at home more. and sort of shopping more in their little local, I mean, in cities, people shopping in their little local neighborhood rather than going into the center of a city and then, you know, grabbing something at the train station on the way home. Is actually, they've got more time to pop to the local shop. So anyone else got any other business to add to our chat? Any other key predictions?
I think we do have to thank the British public, because they rallied around last year, and I think cheese did have a fantastic year. Speciality cheese, people did support the British Cheese Weekender. They are supporting British, and I think that's something that the Great British public are really good at, is rallying around. And cheese is, like Catherine says, it's a heritage product. It's part of our heritage. It's part of our background. It's part of our countryside. And thank you for people for supporting the small cheesemakers, and long may it continue.
Well, I can't think of a better way to finish this panel debate than that, Tracey. It was beautifully put. I concur. Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you've all had a good British Cheese Weekender, and everyone at home watching, I hope you've eaten lots and lots of really good cheese. Take care, stay safe, and get down your local cheesemongers.
Please.
Happy birthday, Shakespeare.
Happy birthday, Shakespeare.
Happy birthday, Shakespeare.